What has the contribution of edge computing been during this year, during the current pandemic?
Yeah, I think edge computing and technology in general, we've seen such a rapid adoption, kind of things that we could have done before, but we just didn't do for various reasons, like having remote meetings or having devices and doing certain decisions. Um, a couple of big ones for edge computing are in the areas of temperature detection screening. So this could be on an individual level or it can be in a larger group. We actually did some prototypes in our lab recently, or actually at the beginning of when COVID started, and to see if you can do how you can do non-contact temperature screening. And one way to do that is through infrared. The problem with infrared is that you're going to have a lot of fluctuations. So you have to have a person's head positioned in the right way so that you can take the temperature in the corner of their eye, which is the most accurate external place to take your temperature. So what we created were models that could detect the position of someone's head. They could then determine whether, who the person was, the position of the head, make sure the head was in position long enough to get an accurate reading, and then they would report that information back. So those are areas where you can take these devices, put fairly small devices, add an infrared camera to it, and then actually have that in a way that somebody doesn't even have to be interacting. Humans don't have to interact to do with the temperature screenings and other things. A couple of the other ones are, if you think about it from an edge computing standpoint, contact tracing is a nice edge application because what you have is this decentralized system that you're at least supposed to not be able to necessarily track back to a person, but you still want to be able to track that they were in contact with somebody, meaning that the privacy preservation is actually taking place on the device. So you're sharing information, but you're not actually sharing it that you're a specific person, just from a contact tracing standpoint. So we find edge computing in a lot of those things because, obviously the easy button there is to send everybody's data back to a central vendor for central data center and then let them sort it out. But obviously there's lots of problems with that and doing it that way. So the privacy preserving approach is to do a lot of those computations on the phone itself. One of the more interesting COVID related things that I read fairly recently was a paper published by Dr. Ellen Lee in University of San Diego College of Medicine. And what they were doing is actually using natural language processing to determine factors of loneliness, so in aging population. So in that case, what you're taking and doing is using AI to determine how lonely a person is, which then ends up determining typically how their health outcomes are. And there's lots of work in this area trying to determine that from a mental health standpoint. So you're seeing that certainly in aging populations, you're taking devices, putting it in somebody's home. And in this case, it could just be something that does, voice interpretation. But you can also do obviously fall detection, lots of different biometric sensors and those sort of things. And then can be used to make those determinations. So the NLP project was related to COVID. So these are elderly people that have been at home, and now these AI models are used to determine just how lonely are they. Does somebody need to check in on them? And then that can obviously be related to another device that does high rate sampling of certain biometrics. So that's the thing to keep in mind on edge computing is for certain things to work, you need high rates of sampling. And if you're transmitting those high rates of sampling when there's potentially no value, that becomes expensive and doesn't really work. So the idea of edge computing in any of these cases would be that you can increase the rate of sampling and inference as high as you want, but then only transmit the data that then becomes valuable because you detected some sort of event.
Thank you very much. So your book is Making Sense of Edge Computing, published by Manning Publications. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you.